worked badly. Okay, I will find it, and I will read that after. Instead, we will start with Peter Hunter, please, and that will be for 3 minutes. Thank you.
Start about 3 minutes. Thank you very much for coming tonight. I understand you all are busy. If you can't remember my name, just look at this person up here. This is not my child here, but I support them, so I'm Peter Hunter. This is my first parliamentary election. The reason I'm standing is because I'm very worried that the Labour and Conservative have both lost their way and will not do much for everybody in this room, whereas we will do quite a lot for people in this room, and I want to explain what we will do. So the various things that we are finding important, and in the reform you may have seen Nigel Farage's contract, we don't call it a manifesto, saying that what we will do, and we're going to be hopefully the official opposition. I can say that when the Conservative man is not here, but that's what he's saying publicly, Nigel Farage, because Conservatives are looking to get a huge drubbing because the last 14 years they haven't done you very well, haven't done me very well, and we want people to do better. We want to bring in lower taxes for everybody. One of the ways we'll do that is you won't pay income tax until you're earning at least 20,000 a year, and that will produce, for most people who are working, an extra £1,300 a year straight away. And it's costed, and it's able to do that. I understand my own experience, local crime is a big issue, so we will bring in 8,000 more police officers, put more back on the beat, make the current ones do less paperwork because they spend 20% of their time filling in forms, and we will do a lot about housing as well. We are in favour of building some houses, hopefully not on greenfield sites, but it's a huge problem and it's exacerbated by various other things I'll mention in a moment. The NHS is a great treasure, but it can be better. There are marvellous people working in the NHS, I support it wholly, but there is a lot of management in there behind who could be made to do it more efficiently. And that would mean, in effect, if you could reduce the management and increase the frontline staff, then that would be very good. Oh, 2 minutes elapsed, so I've got a minute to go, okay. There are great schools in this borough. We want to help with the schools. We want to make a fair choice for envy. I'm against the 20% VAT imposition on private schools, only because I think it's a policy of envy from Labour, and I don't believe the money will be switched elsewhere to improve state schools. We want to have debt-free university for people, so I think that's self-explanatory. We're going to employ more apprentice courses, and we will do a lot about getting Wandsworth Bridge opened again, and later on in the talk I'll say a little bit about myself, and that's probably my 3 minutes. How much longer have I got?
No, you've still got 15 seconds.
15 seconds. Well, I'm nearly the best looking candidate, and I'm very keen to work really hard for all of you, and you're welcome to contact me any time. Thank you.
Yes, so hello, and thank you for coming on a Friday evening. So my name is Kieren and McCarthy, and I want to be your next Member of Parliament. And so I imagine you're thinking, who on earth, especially in this climate, would want to be a politician? And you've got a point. It is a slightly unusual approach right now, and it's not exactly the most beloved job right now. But anyway, I chose to because I've become pretty unhappy with how things have been going. I think it's been appalling the last few years. I was in America when Trump was elected, and that was a really eye-opening experience. And I didn't realize quite how fragile our democracies were. And then I came back, and then I lived through, how many prime ministers have we had in the last few years, including some pretty terrible ones. And so I thought, right, I'm going to get involved in politics, and so that's where I'm standing. My argument would be that the strange thing about this election is that we already know who's going to win. It's going to be Labour, and it's really just the size of the majority that they're going to have. And if the polls are right, it's going to be absolutely enormous, which worries me a lot, because any government with a very large majority has a tendency to go and do its own things. And with Labour, that tendency tends to be taxes. We've already seen this 20% tax on education, I'm sure there'll be plenty more. But in Putney, you have a choice. And I think you should choose Lib Dem for the reasons I hope we'll go through. In Richmond, they've had a Lib Dem MP for a long time now, Sarah Owen, and in Twickenham, and in Kingston, and then Wilman will be a Lib Dem MP as well. And I think it's because the Lib Dem's values and principles and policies actually sit really well with the people of Putney. I think if you were to put in a Labour candidate, you would end up with yet another Labour candidate. I don't think you should reward this current Conservative government on any level, but I think they need a drubbing to get themselves back to where they were. I was actually a big fan of Justine Greening, and I think the reason why Putney went Labour was because everybody was very upset with how she was treated and the fact she stood by her principles and was beat out, and she was a good constituency MP. So I hope basically to turn Putney to the Lib Dems, because I believe the people who live in Putney, the more I talk to you all, the more it seems to gel and fit, have the same principles and values, and I don't think the other two parties do to the same degree. So that's my brief pitch.
Yeah.
I'm a classical socialist. I've been involved in politics since I was 17 years of age. I've never stood for Parliament, but I thought times had come critical, and I no longer feel I'm able to vote for the Labour Party. They expelled me last year. That's not the gripe. It's that the Labour Party, I think, has abandoned all possibility of becoming a defender of the ideas of socialism. And I think Jeremy Corbyn's expulsion is, if you like, the proof of the pudding in terms of where the Labour Party has gone and where it's going. What do I mean by classical socialism? Well, interpreting the world that we've been living in is one thing I've been trying to do. I've spent my whole adult life trying to understand the world from the perspective of socialism versus capitalism. And I went to live, my mother's from Germany, and I went to live in East Germany before the Berlin Wall came down, and I got involved with people who were advocating a new type of, because in 1988 when I went there, many people in East Germany believed that it would be possible to establish a different type of socialism, a democratic type of socialism. Now they use the phrase, you'll be familiar with the Prague Spring of 1968, when people said, socialism with a human face. So I believed in that, and I still believe in that. I still believe there is an alternative to Western capitalism and the system that existed in the Soviet Union. And so, naturally, with German litigation, I was bitterly disappointed that it ended up the way it did. But at the same time, I joined in with the events there, and I still focus on the world and look at the world through that kind of prism. So what does that mean for contemporary analysis? It means that in 2008, I think there was a decisive breach within the global capitalist system. The system entered into a global crisis driven by the price of profitability, and that led politically to economically first to a long-term economic depression, with slight booms and slumps in between, and then to a gigantic polarisation of politics. Brexit reflected that, Trump election reflected that, the European elections are a reflection of that, and from this perspective, I see the polarisation in this election, one towards reform, and the other polarisation that they're not really talking about is, I think, a significant part of the Labour vote will go towards either independents, like Jeremy Corbyn, or Workers' Party candidates around the country. They're not reflecting this in the news, but I think that's the general trajectory, which was reflected in what happened in Rochdale with the election of George Galloway in February. And I think that the ideas of socialism, in one form or another, are being revived internationally, beginning to be revived internationally.
Thank you very much. And I have found a statement from Felix Burford Connolly, I'm not sure exactly how it's pronounced, from the Rejoin EU party. It is as follows. I am standing in the general election for Putney constituency to demonstrate my and my party's rejection of Brexit. The last 8 years have been a time of chaos and division in this country, and no single factor in this chaos has been more important than Brexit. Brexit is the single biggest problem undermining our society. It is the engine behind the cost of living crisis, it's reducing our ability to live, work and holiday abroad, and it takes away from the next generation the educational opportunities we could all enjoy through Erasmus. Brexit has undermined British prestige and credibility in the world. Governmental rhetoric about the UK's world-beating international position is a hollow sham. While the big parties not mentioning Brexit, we have one of the most dishonest elections we've ever seen. My claim to be the next MP for this constituency rests on my willingness to point out this dishonesty and raise my political voice against it. That's why I'm putting myself forward in this election. If elected, I will ensure Parliament has at least one voice calling out Brexit for what it is, a con. I hope and believe that as time goes by, there will be more MPs from a range of parties who agree with me. Putney has the opportunity to take the lead by sending a rejoinder to Parliament in 2024. They can be sure that my voice will always be speaking up against Brexit and for the Rejoin cause. So that's from Felix Burford Connolly from the Rejoin EU party. Thank you. So, that's how I read it. Okay, so we are now ready to take questions. So each of the candidates will get 90 seconds, a minute and a half to reply. And I'll obviously mix up the order that we do it in, so we don't always have the same person starting. Questions? You had your hand up first. Red hat.
Yes, red hat. How appropriate. There has been so many strikes over the last few years. People just factor in train strikes now. It just happens. There's no tubes here, but there's no sort of tubes here. There is generally tube strikes, and now people just got used to it, and doctor strikes and all sorts. What would you do to sort of lobby and stop these strikes from happening?
So it's about strike.
Yeah.
Let's start with
Nearly all the strikes that take place, I think, have perfectly legitimate grounds, and therefore I stand in solidarity with the strikers, for example, the road workers and the doctors. People don't go on strike for nothing. They don't go on strike for fun. It's often made out in the news that they go on strike literally for a laugh. Often it's the case that by the time they've been going on strike for on and off for many months in the case of the Rail Workers Union, the money they lose actually means that even when they make a pay gain at the end of it, they don't make it back up. But they're standing up for a principle, because otherwise wages are driven down. I believe that in general there is a conflict of interest between capital and labour, and that can manifest itself also in the public sector, and that the working classes are generally the main producer of wealth, and that they're put under pressure to increase the intensity of work and to extend the working day. And that's in the interest of the accumulation of profit, and the workers have a natural instinct to attempt to improve their lot, and the one way they can do that is by withdrawing their labour.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, so it depends on which strike you're talking about. I mean, all strikes are completely different in the sense that there's teachers at the special education needs school in Roehampton on strike. In fact, they finished today. And that's because the council's decided to try and shift the children that are there, most of whom actually live on the Alton estate, into Wandsworth Town because it saves their money. And they're saying this is a terrible idea, most of us live there, and you shouldn't do this, and so they're striking. And I entirely support that strike, entirely support that strike. I think the doctors' strikes were very interesting. Doctors don't tend to strike. I know a lot of doctors, and they just felt that their wages were not adequate, and I tend to agree with them. Now, how do you resolve something like that? It's obviously complicated. What you need to do is put money into the NHS. Where do you get the money from the NHS? The bigger macro point is you've got to grow the economy. How do you grow the economy? You tie closer ties with Europe is by far and away the easiest, fastest way to grow the economy. And it is a little crazy, but we're not talking about it more. It just is. The train strikes, it's a complicated one. I'm not going to be able to do that in 30 seconds. Yes, no, I think they probably do deserve a pay rise. The issue has been that pays have been stagnant in this country. They were stagnant for like 30 years and only popped up the last 2 or 3 years. So I understand where they're coming from. Where I don't agree with them is that they are resisting technological changes because they feel that they'll lose workers, and those technological changes are actually good changes, will mean more efficient trains. So it depends. I mean, it's complicated, let's be honest, but those are my positions on the three that popped into my head.
Thank you. Peter, please.
I agree that the reasons people are striking vary from whether you're a railway worker or a doctor or a national health employee, and there are different solutions for that. what we've been saying in reform is that the main thing is to get the economy going again, because it's been crashed both by Labour and for the last 14 years by the Conservatives. And therefore, the main thing we're trying to do is, one of our main planks is trying to support the 5.6 million self-employed people who've got their own businesses at the bottom of the tree, as it were. And I agree we want to be taxing the profits on the water companies and feeding that money back into the economy. I think the NHS staff have had good things. I disagree. I think some strikes have an inherent political leaning in it. If I was a driver of the trains, I'd be very happy to be getting 65,000 a year. So I think it's a political problem, the railway strikes, and I don't support their art. But what we are doing, therefore, is to support the economy, get small business going again, and we want also to put a lot more money into the education system. So we'll offer more apprenticeships, we'll do away with the bad degrees, and we'll encourage more money into education. That's my timeline. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You asked the question. Do you feel that the question has been answered?
Yes. I'll say it has been answered, but yeah, I'll say it's been answered. Thank you very much.
Good. Very much. So we move on to the next question, please.
My question is about racism. It's on the increase, you know. I just recently met an Asian chap and I met a Caribbean chap. Both of them actually said they joined the Met Police. This question is not about the police, it's about racism. And they both joined the Met Police and they left after 1 week because of racism from fellow Met Police officers. So my question is as white middle-class men, what could you really have about, you know, is it one in, how many ethnic minorities in London? Is it 1 in 3 or something, or 1 in 4? I don't know. About 1 in 4 people are ethnic minorities. As white middle-class men, what could you have about what it's like to suffer racial abuse in every department of your life?
Thank you. Let's start, please, with Kieren.
Good question. I like it. I'll tell you the insight that I have, which is a start point, is until a couple of years ago, my wife is Indian American, as in her parents were both from India. I was living in Oakland, which is a very mixed neighborhood, but predominantly a black neighborhood, just outside San Francisco. I was English, and most of my family wasn't there. So my family became this group of wonderful Indian aunties and uncles. And all of my neighbors were American and different races and different colors, with totally different cultures. And it was really interesting to not be the dominant race, if you want to say it that way. It's very sort of clunky. It was really interesting. And people treated me very differently to how I've been treated my whole life. People were occasionally aggressive towards me because of who I was. And that gave me, and then also if you're in America, you really start to understand race, unless you actively avoid it, you start to understand race. It's nowhere near as bad here. But it's still here. So you start to see it a little bit, you start to feel it a little bit. And then you think, oh, okay, this is what it's like to be an outsider while you're living there. I thought about learning an American, I thought about learning an American accent in order to fit in. My wife said, no, I'm not French. Anyway, so that was the beginning of a good insight into what it's like, and I've just held on to that, and I see people more, I would say. And then I listen to people more, and that's how I gain insights. And can we have like 5 seconds? And go out of my way to recognize people, and we'll try and recognize people and help them out to get to places, because I see the barriers. I've got more to say.
We might be able to come back to you. We'll see how we can. Thank you. All right, thank you. Peter.
Well, I agree with you. There is racism everywhere. I think in this country it is not nearly as bad as it is in other countries. I grew up in the Caribbean. I've lived in America on 2 different tours as a diplomat, and see the appalling things that go on in states which you refer to. I think we have an urgent need in this country to try and persuade the huge numbers of new people coming here to assimilate our culture and not live in their own, and I would use the word ghettos, that's the wrong word, but communities isolated from everything else going around them. You can see on the wall over there a wall poster saying British values, and we want everybody to understand those, because out of those British values is an element of non-racism. We've all seen problems with the police. I think they have incredible problems to deal with. I think stop and search is a good thing, but it shouldn't be tainted towards the coloured community, and therefore there's work to do, but it's much better living in this country, and that's why everybody's coming in boats to come here, because it's a much nicer place than in France, where you see the race riots going on. And we'll probably get some dissent from the back there. That's my time.
Dissent.
That was my time.
David, was that Newcastle Shore?
I've got 15 seconds to go, so I would just say I'm welcome to discuss it. Yeah, okay.
Okay,
That was my time.
that's it. Thank you so much. Heiko, your turn.
Something occurred to me when you said that, like a historical reference. When I lived in East Germany, I remember being surprised. Officially, of course, the whole state was anti-racist. Everyone would collect little stickers for Zimbabwe, or for Mozambique, or for Angola, or for the revolution in Vietnam. And the Vietnamese lived amongst the East Germans. The Angolans and Mozambicans worked with the East Germans in factories. But they were slightly segregated. There was a differentiation, even though officially they were brother countries and sister countries working together. There was some quite sharp distinction between them, and a lot of the African students, funny enough, in East Germany, got Western money, whereas the East Germans didn't, so there was some resentment about that. But nothing ever broke out into fights or anything like that, ever. And I remember seeing in the train stations that people would meet up with some East German, because they couldn't travel, you see. They would sit with some of Mozambique or some from Vietnam, just having a drink, and then East Germans are very African countries, so you started talking to other people, and then you started discussing with each other, exchanged addresses, and staying. In those days, you would write a letter to the person and their family in Vietnam when they went back, and so on. And then the collapse came. When East Germany unified with West Germany, the economy collapsed. The East Germans were the foreigners were basically either sent back or they claimed asylum and stayed in East Germany, or in the United Germany, just a few seconds more. And then in 1992, after a 50% collapse in the economy, I remember going to Rostock. Some of the older people might remember here, and there were firebombs thrown at the buildings where the Vietnamese were living, and people were chanting, "Kick them out, kick them out, kick them out." So the point I'm trying to make is it's primarily an economic function. It's not everything, but it's primarily an economic function, racism, and the worst aspects of racism. My father's Chinese, so I have some knowledge about how we treat his kids, but it wasn't. I would agree that Britain is generally a very, very tolerant country, despite what some people make out. It is a very tolerant country.
Thank you. Because you went slightly over,
Sorry.
and you wanted, no, it's okay, these things happen, we're not going to, and you wanted to add a little bit more, would you like to do that?
No, let's take questions.
Okay.
I could go on forever.
Okay, that's fine. So, the person who asked the question, are you happy with the answer? You feel they've answered the question? Okay.
Go.
Did you want to make it? Yeah.
Oh, please, quickly, yeah. Sorry, I don't really want to ask a question as such. It's just, take me about 60 seconds just to make an observation. Yeah? My observation is this. When we talk about politics is about people wanting things, yeah? If they say, if you could always get what you want when you wanted, there'd be no need for politics. So with politics, we try and live smoothly with one another and get what we want, and everybody's happy to some extent. Obviously, it's a bit more complex than that, but that's some of the basics of politics. Now, this gentleman here was talking about people more living with other people in cultures, opening their culture to other people. Yes, it works sometimes, but we know over the decades, I'm born here, lived here since 1967, yeah? And human beings, if you think of the psychology of us, a lot of us were hypocrite, double standards, so many other flaws within our characters. And we don't even really, as such, get on with each other in large volumes. That's why you're always hearing in news and papers, this one had a fight with this one, this neighbour had a fight with this one. And I don't want to sound negative, but sometimes if you look at humans in general, a lot of us, sometimes we're jealous of each other and so many other things. Despite we have to fight against that, that's sometimes why people keep to themselves, because humans, sometimes, they're some of the most difficult people you can deal with. That's why people prefer dogs and cats and animals. That's just my observation.
Right, okay,
Thank
you so much. Okay, next question. Gentleman in the, yes, the colour.
Wandsworth is a borough of sanctuary. Can you explain your personal or your party's position with regards how that would fit with that current housing situation and your feelings in relation to those two issues?
So a bird sanctuary, you said?
Sorry?
Bird sanctuary.
Borough.
Bird sanctuary.
Borough.
I was thinking barn, surely, is where the wetlands is.
Sorry, for us, thick ones, I'm talking about myself here. What does that mean? I don't even understand.
Perhaps the candidates will explain.
A bird sanctuary.
I'm seeing this to get sanctuary here, that's what I imagine.
What, in Wandsworth?
Well, that's what he said.
Is that what it is?
Does everyone know what it is?
Oh, you want to say the animal and then
A borough of sanctuary is, Wandsworth has been declared a borough of sanctuary for refugees who are coming to this country as to be welcomed and places to give them as much support as possible to enable them to settle down and find education and find homes and to be given the support that is actually they're encouraged to get.
And who has declared them as such?
The council.
The council.
Okay. So the question is, how does that, because you mentioned housing policy, how does that fit with housing policy?
How does it fit with, yes, the parties' take on housing and immigration and things like, are they supportive of it, or how do they feel about it?
Okay, lovely, I think we understand the question, great, thank you. So I think this time the person who should start, I'm being fair here, got the calculation going, would be Heiko, you're on.
Okay, coming back to the same approach, when an economy is booming, people welcome people in. When an economy is in crisis, people begin to fear for their position. So in the early 1980s, it was still possible in London, and I have friends who lived around here, at 19, 20 to get a council flat. Just go on the register. Within a year, I know friends here who've got council flats. Lambeth, the same thing. Westminster, the same thing. No great claim, I'm this minority, that minority, I'm special group. It was possible, because the houses were there. I think before that, if I remember right, there was some decrease in the population in London as well. And it's also true that Wandsworth has been certainly was a very strong Remain voter, which means that basically the population of the borough was supportive of free migration, of people moving here from different countries in Europe and doing jobs, opening shops and so on and so forth. And I think the borough benefited from that, from having Polish shops and the Polish communities and the East European workers and all the rest of it. I think that was beneficial. And so I think the consequence of the economic crisis from 2008 onwards is the real root of what we're seeing in relation to conflicts about the votes, conflicts about refugees, conflicts between Islam and Christianity and that type of thing. I think that's the real root of it. That's not a full answer to your question, but I wanted to put an overall global perspective on it.
Thank you. Kieren?
Yeah, so I'm very supportive of the idea of being a borough sanctuary, and I realise it is largely a political statement, one that I agree with. And this country has for a very long time been a sanctuary for people all over the world. This is why we've got especially in London, why we've got such a mixed, diverse, vivid culture. And we continue to do that, and I think that we should be proud of that, we should continue to do that. You're right in the sense that the tensions have come because our economy has been terrible now for a really long time, and tensions always arise when that happens. And unfortunately, it's human nature that people tend to look to other people and other them, and that's why we are where we are. Which I don't know, I don't think any of us love, to be honest. What's the solution to that is to grow the economy and it's to make things a little bit better for everybody. And in the meantime, battle this sort of growing intolerance of people And I think by saying that we're a sanctuary borough, that we do, you put us the stick in the centre, you say, no, we won't take your intolerance, we will support people, we will back people up. So I'm very supportive of it. What, in terms of the pragmatic impact? Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because then you have to house the people that you welcome. And we do have a housing problem, which hasn't been helped by the Labour Council's current plans to build bad buildings on people's only sort of green space. The current estates they have, which is a terrible way of doing things, it's going to cause more problems. So, I've run out of time. Can we have a bit more time with these questions? I haven't managed to answer your question. Sorry about that. I went on about my strong support of being the boroughs.
Thank you. Peter?
It's a huge problem for the whole country, not just for Wandsworth. And the reform policy is that, like most people, we should welcome in this country genuine refugees. But the main problem, which we can bang on, which causes a problem for all legal migrants and other groups within the borough, is that if we have 750,000 people coming in illegally over a 2-year period, it swamps your NHS, it swamps your housing list, and it swamps your road system and everything else. So it's a problem for everybody. We have said, and all the parties have said, we need to grip illegal immigration. Within Wandsworth, I'm afraid, and she's not here to defend herself, Fleur has created a problem. For instance, she reported last year 860 people who she just welcomed here and pushed to the front of the housing list, which has annoyed everybody else on the housing list because they've been pushed back by many, many months or whatever. And so it's both a local problem and I support legal migration of proper refugees. But I think it's being misinterpreted, as was referred to here, locally by Labour, not to the advantage of all the residents. So I would say, we need to tackle it nationally. Reform will do that. We're going to be the official opposition. I'm going to be your MP because you don't need to have Fleur re-elected now because there'll be such a large Labour majority. So you've got a choice now to have somebody else as your MP. Thank you. My time's up.
Very much.
Can I retort?
You absolutely can.
Query the figure of 750 illegal immigrants. I don't think that is a true figure. I think I question where you get that because I think they're invited on the basis. And so, are you standing by 750 illegal immigrants?
Well, I said over 2 years there is published figures which...
But not illegal immigrants, they have been invited.
Illegal. Those are illegal migrants.
Illegal.
Because that's a net figure, that means there are a lot of people leaving the country for all very good reasons, but it doesn't take into account all of the legal people coming here on work visas who then bring their families with them, which is causing a further problem. So.
The other point is that no one has actually tackled or mentioned Section 21 of the Housing and the Rent Reform Act, which I thought was quite disappointing since you are all supposed to be local MPs. And talking about the housing issue, and one of the main things for renters and for people buying it is the Section 21, which was going to be tackled under rent reform. And I'm very disappointed as candidates, no one mentioned it.
Well, we can give you an opportunity to talk about it now if you want.
Okay.
What is this section?
Sorry, Chair, can you tell us what Section 21 is so we know what's going on?
Oh, do you want to explain? Because you asked the question, you're educating us all.
Section 21 of the Housing Act 1988 allows a landlord to ask their tenant to leave without any reason, and they have to give them 2 months' notice, and they don't have to give any reason at all.
Even on winter?
Anytime.
No false evictions?
No false eviction.
Yes. So, I think I got there eventually. I think my 1.5 minutes were up. Yes, Section 21 is a disaster. And in fact, Fergal, the Green Party, he tell you who's just recently served one, is having to move from Thamesville to Southwood as a result. My landlord was just called contract early, 2 months early on me, and my family, so I'm not thrilled about that either. The Lib Dem end, no full evictions, that needs to go. It does need to be changed. And just on the housing thing, but it does also support a 3-year default contract, because the year-to-year contract, especially in London, becomes a major problem. And so yes, it's being tipped the wrong way, and it needs to be tipped back. So that's what we're starting from now.
Do you want to answer?
Yeah, I've been involved in lots of housing campaigns and I've fought a lot of cases, legal cases about housing, eviction and so on. And basically, we need to change the fundamental structure of the legal framework for private rentals so that people rent effectively permanently. Like in Germany, you get a rental contract, or at least when I lived in Germany, you get a rental contract, it's for life. As long as you're paying the rent, what used to be in those days quite low, and they had a low rate of increase, I think 3% was the maximum at the time, you could stay there basically forever. And I agree with that, and I think rent should be controlled, quite sharply controlled, pushed downwards, to allow people to have a decent and stable life. And that stable life, on relatively low cost rental, allows the rest of the resources you've got, the spare cash you've got, to be used for the development of the economy. Rentier economics is basically because a lot of people don't know where they can invest and make some money out of something reasonably effective, small business and so on. And the consequence of that is a lot of people put their, basically rely on buying a property and renting it out as a kind of pension security. And I think that needs to be eradicated by providing much securer pensions for people as well. And then that way we don't have to pressure people into buying. I think the obsession with buying in England has produced this type of crisis. And the obsession with private ownership has also produced this type of crisis.
Thank you. Peter, do you want to comment on that?
Just a quick comment about Germany, because my brother lives there. You're quite right what you say about rentals for life, but they have almost no mortgage market there, so it's very difficult for people to buy properties there. And so they do have a good system, but it also has its problems as well. You didn't mention Section 21, so when you asked us the question, you asked us about sanctuary, which was really about people coming here. You could have mentioned Section. The Reform Party is against Section 21. We would go for reforming it. We will jab Labour when we're the official opposition, and I get elected with a sharp stick to get that done. But they're a bit wishy-washy about it. You've seen very few actual proposals put out there. They talk largely about reforming the housing policy and helping everybody and welcoming everybody here and there. But the Starmer continually refuses to actually name what he will do. So I've got a few seconds left. I'm afraid it is tied up with a huge number of people the size of the city of Leicester coming here every year. That's an enormous problem because we can't build 3 million houses a year, which is needed. And each of the big parties have only said they can build roughly 1 million, Labour and Conservative. And where are they going to build it? On our lovely greenfield sites, which we don't want taken away from all of us. And that tips into the Wimbledon problem as well. Or should we, or should we make better use of brownfield sites and regathering in empty buildings and forcing them to be used?
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Hopefully that answers your question. So went 2 in 1. You had your hand earlier, so I'll go to the gentleman in the hat, and then if anybody over here wants to ask a question, I feel like we've been over here a lot. So yeah, please. Yeah.
I have a question about the NHS system. I take 6 weeks to registration for the GP, and almost every testing takes several weeks to get the result. But this very surprised me, It's registration in other countries are 5 minutes now. The testing results almost the same days we can get the testing results. But I don't know what's your system has the problem or the national system problem. So what's your solutions for this one?
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so let's start with Peter.
Sorry, Chair, I'm deaf on that side. What's the question?
The question is about the NHS, and in particular, this gentleman tried to register with the NHS, and it took 6 weeks for it to happen. So it's sort of specifically about that, but I think also generally about the NHS. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
How can we improve the performance of the NHS?
Yeah, how can we make it function better? Okay. Peter.
I think I refer to my earlier remarks that the NHS quite rightly is a sacred cow in this country, and most governments are terrified of saying anything about it and doing anything about it. It did fantastically well during COVID, but it does have a huge administrative tail within it, and far too many managers managing managers and things like that. And one way of improving the registration and the test result timings will be to make the whole system more efficient. And I'm afraid it's not the success which both governments have tried to do over the past 20 years of just pumping more and more money into employing more and more managers, employing more and more diversity managers, it's an important subject, but it's not as vital as you on the front line wanting to be tested and get your results. So there should be a lot more done to improve that. We've said in reform that we will do that. Labour have said they will do that, but they've got so many other problems. Actually, all they're going to do is put more money into the NHS, which is a good idea, but it doesn't make it any better and it doesn't change your problem.
Thank you very much. Next, please, Kieren.
Yes, so the NHS is a massive, complex beast. In fact, it's so complicated that literally nobody fully understands it. So I quite like the precision of that question. I register, it takes 6 weeks. To get tested, it takes 4 weeks. Why is that not more efficient? And that's because the NHS is a bit too much of a big beast. And one of the solutions, which would massively save money and make the NHS more effective, would be to focus on preventative medicine. So it's incredibly expensive to deal with somebody who is going into hospital who is quite far along with the disease. It is much, much cheaper to do preventative medicine and for them to take another 10 years to get to that point, or maybe never even get to that point. But the way we are structured, the NHS is structured and hasn't modernised, is it's set up around dealing with people who are sick. If we spend more time focusing, and this could be a space where the private sector comes in, is to have more preventative medicine. Like, for example, my wife has an aura ring. Have you seen these things? And it's really a good thing. She loves it. She just wears it on the ring. It tells her an enormous amount about her health. God knows how it works. It's incredible technology. And this helps her realise, oh, I need to do this, or I need to do this. Just that small amount of preventative medicine means you don't end up at this very expensive point. And then, well, there's a lot of other stuff for the NHS that needs correcting. But it needs more money, but more money isn't the only answer. It does need reform, and I hate saying reform in the NHS because everybody says reform the NHS, everybody tries to reform the NHS. But the main thing politicians can do is back out of the system a little bit and stop setting so many targets and changing the targets every couple of years, because then they spend a lot of time fitting the targets all the time.
Thank you. Heiko.
The NHS is held up as a sacred cow, but it's actually not what it used to be. The NHS is a privatised institution. It's not a state institution. They've concealed the fact they privatised it, and they made out, for example, they threw dust in everybody's eyes, and worse, that's the minimum word I could use, dust, during the coronavirus crisis. During that period, the entire health system was destroyed. And the consequences will last for a generation. And what they did was, for example, in the hospitals, Hammersmith Hospital, for example, they got windows. They didn't open the windows. Everybody knew this was supposed to be a respiratory virus. They didn't open the windows. And the virus spread throughout the hospitals like lightning. A friend of mine works as a consultant on the COVID wards. She was in Bristol, in the hospital there. On Wednesday, 1 person. On Saturday, 200 people. On the next week, 500 people in the hospital. There were only 1,000 beds left. They'd halved the beds in the hospital. Then the NHS doctors were turned into some kind of jabbing factory, and they employed, you all know that schools like this were opened up for people to get jabs all the time. The doctors got £15 per jab. And now they'll write to old people like my mother, who's 89 years of age, and they write to her every now and again, say, come for another jab, come for another jab, come for another. They don't ask whether the jab's any good. There's no informed consent anymore. The NHS is a disaster zone and needs to be revolutionised by medicine from below for the people. And by medicine I mean natural healthcare is the primary question that we need to think about again. How do we look after our bodies? What is good for our nutrition? What exercise should we do? You know, these type of things are the fundamentals. They didn't even, sorry to carry on there, they didn't even go on about that during COVID. They just kept saying, wait for the jab, stay at home. Wait for the jab, stay at home. They should have been taking vitamin D, they should have been advising people to go out, they should have been people in the sun, they should have encouraged people to meet, they should have encouraged people to see their grandparents. All this was an utter and complete catastrophe. And that's one of the main things I will campaign on if I'm elected as Member of Parliament.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? You're clapping, so I'm guessing it does. Or maybe not.
From my perspective, I'm a young people. I have a cough and I have the cold, catch a cold, and I go to the registered GP. And six weeks later, I recover. Nothing happened. I don't need medicine anymore. But for the aging people, for the older people, they will be very serious problem. After 6 weeks registration,
6 weeks.
that's a big problem. I think this in UK you only have the 17 million people living in these countries. But I don't like Chinese government, but they do very good. They have the 1.4 billion people living over there, but they can manage the medical system very good. 5 minutes for registration now, and every testing always simply is more. So I think that is you have a big space to improve. Yeah. So this is not related with only the investment money or something. So I think your system has a big problem. Really big problem.
Does anybody want to reply?
Yes, so I signed up, I don't know if you've seen Putney High Street recently. I wrote, actually, we're doing not too bad now, really most of the time, but Putney High Street is an absolute dead zone. In fact, wasteland. There was in the national press saying it's a wasteland the other day. I've started a charity called Save the High Street, and the idea is to get into those shops and open them all up. So we've been talking to a lot of people about, well, what can we put in there? And one of the things we spoke to is the NHS Federation, which is sort of the umbrella body above the NHS. And they've got some good people in there, and they have a plan. So it's a pilot right now called Health on the High Street. And their idea is like, why are we making people go out to hospitals? If we put it in places where they are all the time, they'll be popping in to do what they need to do, so, i.e. find spots on the high street and have whatever you need there. So what this guy is doing for us in Putney is he's speaking to the primary secretary and the ICS and all the people there saying, what are your gaps? They're made to write these reports which they say, this is our health gap in this area, this is our health gap. And so he's finding what the gaps are, and then you install whatever the gap is. It could be mental health, it could be dentistry, it could be another GP practice, it could be whatever is the gap. And then find spots on the high street, and there's high streets all over the country that have gaps, and then put that there. And that way you pull people to the high street, and they're at that high street. So that's one other way of doing it. And that, for example, if there are people saying, this is crazy, it's taking me 4 weeks to get tests, have a testing facility, or at least have a facility where you can go and get blood drawn.
Anybody else want to reply?
Yeah, it's a very big theme, so obviously it deserves a bit more time in theory. Yeah, coming back to this question about what is health, this is what we really need to start thinking about as a society. What is health? What is a good life? What is a healthy life? When I was 50, the doctor said to me, oh, let's take your cholesterol. Then they took my cholesterol, 7 point something or other, high cholesterol. And then I don't know anything about, at that time I didn't know anything about cholesterol. And then they say, okay, statins for life. I started taking statins, getting better. I started taking statins. A few weeks later, I'm getting pins and needles all over my body. And then pins and needles right up to my head, from my feet to my head. I stopped taking the statins, they go away. So, why are they deciding to give statins? Because of a statistical calculation that such and such a percentage, with no other change, given statins, will have a slightly reduced rate of getting. Instead of this, she should have said, do you eat broccoli? What type of food do you eat? Do you drink? All this type of stuff. And of course, when you first, when I was 50, I was still drinking a fair bit. When I first saw the doctor, then they turn around and say, do you drink any? And you lie. You say, yeah, no, I drink 2 a night, and like that. And then, so they're not dealing with the problem. They're not actually fine. And the less contact there is between real human beings, the less that. Doctor, when I was a kid, he used to come to our home and visit us. He came to our home and visited us when we were ill. That's what you need, a doctor who knows the patients, not some alien creature. A lot of the doctors, by the way, in the surgeries are not even doctors anymore. They're assistants who've got no medical training whatsoever. And our proper doctors for 10 years, these people got no training whatsoever. And then they present themselves as doctor's surgery.
Thank you. Peter, do you want to comment?
Sorry.
It's 7:30 and I'm going to another hustings further north, okay, so I've got to support the others. There are so few people from Reform and we need your support. So in 90 seconds, all I would say is...
you're allowed longer than 90 because you're going to have your wrap-up as well.
My wrap-up, I'll include the wrap-up as well.
Your wrap-up. So,
I think I won't add anything about the national...
You can have 3 minutes, give them a whole 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay, fine. Well, thank you very much. So I'm going to go and help somebody else. I'm going to be asking you all to distribute leaflets shortly, so that'll amuse you. And you'll get to meet all of your neighbours who you probably don't normally talk to. But on a serious note, we have a very big problem. Both the Labour and the Conservative have basically mucked it up over the last 20 years. I was a Conservative, I'm now voting Reform, because I don't believe the Conservatives can sort it out, certainly not in the time and the way they've suggested they will. They've failed on so many different aspects, and I don't believe that Labour will do any better. Now, you had a Labour MP for 5 years, she's done some good things, but actually the Labour are going to get a thumping majority, so you don't actually need to keep a Labour MP here. You had a different party before, but now you need to try somebody else, and it needs to be Peter Hunter. Okay, remember the name on the wall, so you can come back and check if you forget, all right? And so it's important, therefore, for you to understand that Reform has announced that they know they will not win a majority, but they want to be a powerful opposition. So if there's anything that the Labour government that comes in that does that you don't like, we will be able, the people, to do something about it, not Labour, who will just go on as before. And I stand by one of my original comments, that we will raise and get raised the basic rate of tax and other improvements for local businesses, and that will enable you to have at least £30–40 a year better off for each person who's working. And we will encourage those people who are not working to get back into work, and we will make it more difficult for people who shouldn't really be on benefits. I'm pro-benefits for the right people, but there are quite a lot of people out there who shouldn't be doing that. So thank you very much for coming tonight. Thank you for listening to these two people. Don't let them be rude about me when I disappear. They can be rude about Fleur if they want to. And thank you very much indeed for your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
You don't have to run away because I'm coming.
Do you have a copy of that?
He does.
By the way, if anybody wants a copy, there are further costings. If anybody wants a copy of them, we have them here in front, so by all means, take them. So, I think we're ready for our next question, if that's okay? Yeah. Oh, does anybody over here want to ask a question? Because I feel like we yeah, you wait just arrived, so we'll come back to you.
Thank you. So, when the war started in Ukraine, I've noticed a lot of solidarity and humanity amongst our political leaders towards the Ukrainian people, and it was quite reassuring. But when the 7th October event happened, we have witnessed also similar kind of compassion and solidarity toward Israeli people. But since then, all the bombing in Gaza, I don't see the same solidarity from our political people. And even before that, 70 years of occupation, including the Deir Yasser massacre, April 48, the Tantura massacre, May 48, Kibia massacre, October 53, Kafr Qasim massacre, 56, the Rafah massacre 56, Bahr al-Bakr primary school bombing 1970, the Sabra Shatila massacre in 82, the Ibrahimi mosque massacre 94, the Jenin massacre 2002, Gaza massacres in 2002, 2012, 2014, 2021, and 7 months of non-stop massacre since and I don't see anything from our political leader. Why this double standard in humanity, and not only in humanity, why also this double standard in human dignity?
Can we please start with Kieren on this one?
Yeah. So it's the intractable conflict on this planet. We have been in the world has been trying for 50 years to resolve this, and we're not getting very much closer. Now, what does, as a sort of Lib Dem representative, what would we do about it? We support the UN in this situation. So the UN, I would say, is the world authority on dealing with this. The UN stands as neutral as it possibly can. The UN has taken a couple of steps recently which has been highly controversial against Israel, and I think that we stand with the UN because that's where the expertise is. That's where the people are trying to be as objective and rational and fair as possible, and the key is to support what they come up with. So that's the approach that I would take as a political party representative within this country. In terms of specifics, stand by Ukraine, absolutely stand by Ukraine. I don't think there's any question to stand by Ukraine.
It was not, I mean, I'm quite glad about Ukraine.
And then stand by the ICC. That again has become controversial because of recent events, but it's the ICC, and what they support them to do their job, that's the deal. The Lib Dem would support increasing international development to 0.7% of GDP, which would, I think, sort of bolster our position in the world with that drop. And of course, must say that they're going to support the ceasefire, and use the word ceasefire, not humanitarian force, from the very earliest days of the conflict. And I don't believe her Lady Moran, which is the only MP that actually has people that family to live in Gaza, and she does a far more eloquent job of explaining how awful that is and what she thinks the solution is. The solution is ceasefire, and the solution is a peaceful solution. I mean, there's no other way around it. It is a dreadful situation.
Thank you very much. Thank you. People at the back, can you kind of be a little bit quieter? It's a little bit distracting. Sorry, I'm teacher mode now. It might be for people who aren't part of this. Thank you, Heiko.
I don't think there's double standard. I think it's one standard. One standard is that Britain has stood with Israel in its oppression of the Palestinian people from the beginning. And I think that goes right back to Balfour and on before. I think that Britain's position in Ukraine is not any different. It might appear different because the Ukrainians obviously are suffering, but the Ukrainians are composed of pro-Russian people and pro-Ukrainian people, and actually pro-Russian regions. The Donbass area was the more developed economic area, and the western region was the poorest region, and there were conflicts being fought out, really going back again to the Berlin Wall. I remember when East Germany collapsed that George W. Bush and Mikhail Gorbachev and Margaret Thatcher and Francois Mitterrand, they all agreed that NATO will not move 1 centimetre east of the Oder-Neisse boundary between Poland and Germany. That was the agreement. That was the foundation upon which the post-Cold War order was founded. But they broke that as soon as the Soviet Union, or Russia, basically collapsed, and they thought they could take advantage. They began, one is to plunder, second is to offer sanctuary to billionaires who were thieves and robbers and robber barons, mafia gangsters, to come to England and buy football clubs and God knows what. And then they kept pushing up against Russia and preparing the foundation for what we see now, which was obviously going to happen. If anybody watches that guy John Mearsheimer, who I recommend you watch, he doesn't agree with me politically, but in fundamentals, his realist analysis of the dynamics behind the war in Ukraine and in Israel are the same. He makes put them in the same category, the big power politics fighting it out. And I'm in full solidarity with the Palestinian people, and I believe that Palestine, or Israel, Palestine, should be one unified state, with the people having equal rights. No more apartheid, no more wars between the people, equal rights for the people.
I think the important question is that our government is complicit in supplying arms and all the rest of it. And this massacre that's going on, it's absolutely moral indignation. I mean, what's happening, what we're witnessing, and there isn't an outcry. Why are we not? Why are people not reacting to this? I mean, we talked about racism. They use anti-Semitism, which is a form of racism. They distort it and they use it. You can't compare it to the Holocaust. Hitler created crimes against humanity. Hitler tried to wipe out the people. He did those crimes. This is what the Israelis are doing. It's anti-Semitic to compare it. What if a poor woman, a Palestinian woman whose children have been killed, says that they are doing what Hitler did to them? Is that anti-Semitic? What is this discussion? Fleur stands up and says, you know, anti-Semitism. They're repressing the students. They don't let the students speak. In workplaces, our press freedom is under threat. I agree with some of the things the Liberal Party stands for, but come on, speak up. Speak up more strongly. You have to take a stand. This kind of inhumanity, that's why we are here. We've been quiet, there are local issues. I mean, this is the third hosting that I've attended. But this is absolutely atrocious. People are, you know, your blood should boil. I mean, look at the children being killed.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you're right. You're right. It is horrific. It's horrific. And it's in this modern world, you can see, and I do see, and I'm sure you do, these videos that make your heart break and make you furious, frankly. But pragmatically, what can you do? What can the UK government do? Well, the most powerful thing it can do is it's on the Security Council. And when the last time this happened, and there was a last time this happened, the way that Israel was finally prevented from doing what it decided it wanted to do was when the United States went to, well, it didn't vote for it, but it abstained from a vote, which criticized Israel, and Israel realized it had no international support, and then finally stopped what it was doing. And that's the point we need to get to, and that's the point we are getting to, but way too slowly. It is important. What do we do in future? Well, the ICC and the United Nations will follow their processes, and the people responsible for legal actions will, I hope, be brought to account. And this government, especially Lib Dem, will stand by that firmly, even though it will cause enormous political ructions. It's the right thing to do. But yes, I mean, it is. I mean, I'm moved. I am very moved by what's going on, and I'm angered by what's going on. But you've got to look at what can you do about it. And unfortunately, if you're not in that country and if you don't have direct power, all you can do is back up the international organizations, and then when this is finally resolved, hopefully they will be held to account, fully to account for their actions.
Thank you.
I think we should take sanctions against companies in Britain which are associated with Israel. For example, Palantir, one of the major figures, the only major company, I think, in the world, who openly declared its direct support for Israel on day one, and runs the surveillance system that monitors and controls Palestinians based on their Facebook responses, and determine whether they're likely to have suicidal ideation and therefore be dangerous. And this company, it operates this system from Soho Square in London. And Google and Facebook and all these companies are all tied up. And Google staff have resigned at Google because of its ties with Israel. And there have been some people, I saw a picture a couple of days ago, Palestine Action, but broke into some arms suppliers supplying to Israel. I would support those type of actions. I support militant action to defeat Israel. It's not enough to go on demonstrations, marching once a month from A to B and listening to 5 speakers who we've all heard before, saying the same things, moving the heartstrings, but doing nothing else. And that, of course, has been canalised and controlled in a way that sort of corresponds with the policies of Suella Braverman, who says these are hate marches. Okay, they're calling us hate marches, so we're going to stick to the route, behave exactly as they say, and obey what they say. During the anti-lockdown protest, which proved, in my opinion, to be motivated by the correct motivations and proved to be correct in what they were saying about what was going on in society, at least they did march without being ordered where to go and asked where to go. They marched wherever they wanted to, and that was very difficult to control. And I think you do need a bit of like anarchy on the streets to be able to compel the government to change its position on Israel.
Thank you. The question just sort of said that it was answered and he had to leave, so we just gave it. How are people doing for time? We're okay to continue? Okay.
Sure.
Next question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to be devil's advocate now. How can the UN justify issuing a war crimes indictment against Benjamin Netanyahu when Benjamin Netanyahu has not done anything that our war criminal Blairite government did, and we still have a Blairite party on schedule to win the next election? They did over 20 years ago. Bomb babies. Blair had those done. Stormtrooper was a collaborator in that Blairite government who was in charge of prosecutions. Lower hospitals. The Blairites did that. Blow up schools. The Blairites did that. Put Muslims in prison without charge. The Blairites did that. Indeed, the Blairites did more than that. They sent our own innocent Muslims to Guantanamo Bay. They had our own innocent Muslims on torture renditions where they're being tortured. And instead of having our Blairite leaders charged with war crimes, like Tony Blair and his collaborators, they're actually earning this country millions of money as successful war criminals who got away with it, selling their expertise to dictators all over the world, and giving the green light to people like Netanyahu to say, see, we got away with it, we rip up hatred against Muslims, we say Muslims are going to wipe you out in 45 minutes with weapons of mass destruction that don't even exist. We lie through our noses and get away with it scot-free, ha ha ha. You can do the same, pay me a few million and I'll help you do it with my own lying spin doctors. How do we justify this? That we have a successful war criminal laughing to the bank in this country, whose party, well, they've won the next election, haven't they? There's no point in holding it. Yet the UN singles out Netanyahu as a war criminal when he's only a small actor copying our war criminal.
Thank you. You summed up your question very well, so I'm wondering how I would. Thank you. So I think this is probably our final question, just based on, I think, it's been a long week for people, so unless someone is burning to ask another question, we'll probably end on this one. So let's have Heiko, do you want to start with this one?
Well, you answered your own question actually, didn't you? Yeah, I mean, Tony Blair, I say he was a war criminal. He lied to the public about the weapons of mass destruction, along with the other machine people who were coal in power. I remember shaking his tin of talcum powder and claiming it was anthrax and all the rest of it. There is a systematic methodology of lies from the ruling elites. I don't actually trust the UN. I mean, in that respect, if that's where you're focusing, I don't think the UN is a reliable body. But when it takes a position that is positive under pressure from, for example, South Africa, then I support it. But in general, I think the UN is an untrustworthy body full of bureaucrats who serve their own interests. But occasionally they'll make some good statements.
Thank you. Kieren.
Yeah, I don't think you can in any way compare Tony Blair and the Iraq War to what Netanyahu was doing in Gaza in any capacity. Yes, it was a fundamental, political, dreadful decision that Tony Blair made. I disagreed with it firmly at the time, I disagree with it now. I think he ruined his legacy, and you can see that even now. But the actions that he took were not the same as Netanyahu was taking on any level. So I do need to say that. I tell you, to bring to this election, I would say part of the problem of why we ended up in that Iraq war is that we ended up with a Labour government with a massive majority, and they had so much power inherent in it that once a government doesn't have a sufficiently strong opposition, they start going down their own paths, and they are able to come up with ideas And if you're in government, you come up with ideas and you've got enough people to support you, you end up going down your own slightly unusual tangents. And what happened with the Blair government was that they believed this thing, they pushed this thing, and they had enough people to push it through, even though there was millions of people on the street. So what concerns me about where we're going to be in a couple of weeks' time is we're going to be in a place with a Labour government who is purposefully not putting out clear policies because they don't want to upset anybody so that they can get the maximum number of votes. They will have a very large majority, and we could easily end up in another, not exactly a Iraq war position, but certainly going down a dangerous path that we shouldn't be going down. So I would argue the best thing we can do in Putney is to not vote for another Labour MP, but to get somebody else in who can at least provide additional balance within our system.
Thank you. I think I'm sensing that we're kind of ready to wrap up. Yeah? So, final comments? Do you want to have a final?
I don't have much more to say. I think presented a relatively comprehensive range of questions. Yeah, I don't really want to say that much. I mean, I hope the Workers' Party gets a lot of votes. I'd even hope to win. But, and I think that's important to have a powerful alternative voice to the Labour Party. I think Fleur is well known in the area. She's run around busy getting her face known in small businesses and community groups. But as far as national and international politics are concerned, I think it adds up to nothing. And if you look at what she did with Gaza, it's monstrous. But obviously, it's not good to speak ill of those who aren't present. But that's my basic point. And it's in opposition to the Labour Party that we have really founded as a stand.
Yes, I would say we are going to get a Labour government. We all know it's going to happen, it's just the size of the majority they get. But so I would say focus on what's going to be best for you in Putney. My critique would be of our current, or the previous MP, is that Putney has been left by the wayside. We still don't have Hammersmith Bridge open after five years of that bridge. And we've been in a bunch of hustings, and we're hearing the same things. Oh well, it's very complicated, and oh well, and they're talking about another 5 years, and it's ridiculous. And I know how to get that bridge open much faster. It just requires people who are willing to push a little bit more and stop going along with the system, which is failing us because it's basically a political battle. You can build a bridge. You can build a bridge in a month. Now, you have to get the money for it, that is saying. It's not a 5-year project, that's for sure. And then the state of the high streets. The high streets are in a terrible state. And that is yet again because there hasn't been focused attention on it, either by the MP or by the council. So, like I said, I've set up a charity to get it going. I shouldn't be needing to do that. That is an MP's job, that is the council's job, and they're not doing a good job of it. And then there's the housing projects in Autumn and Lennox and Innes. These are terrible housing projects that the council is pushing, despite literally 500 people saying, comments saying no, don't do it for good reasons, and 2 saying yes. They're still pushing them. So I say vote them out. That's the job. If they're not doing a good job, vote them out. So I would say look at Richmond and Twickenham and Kingston and Wimbledon and vote for not the Conservatives, gosh we need Conservatives now, not for Labour because she's not been doing a good job. Vote for the Lib Dems because we have got a good, well-running group in South West London and we'll make it work, get the bridge open and fix the high street.
You should see Sutton's High Street, it's empty, it's been run by the Lib Dems.
Sutton?
High Street, Lib Dems.
Thank you very much. Okay, I just want to say thank you very, very, very much for those of you who came and those of you, my gosh, who stayed until the end on a Friday night. You are free to go to the pub or whatever it is you want to do now. If you want a flyer, please take it where the further hustings are happening. We'll keep this going.
Yeah. Good news is we got listed in the SW15.com website as the main story. So the hustings will be rotating around.
Oh,
Kieren,